Billionaire left his pregnant wife in the rain to teach her a lesson, but he never expected his. Before we dive into the main story, don't forget to subscribe, comment, and like our stories. The rain poured mercilessly against the glass walls of the mansion, streaking silver lines across the night. She stood outside, one hand clutching her swollen belly, the other pounding on the locked door as her tears blended with the storm. Inside he watched, arms folded, face carved in cold stone, believing she needed to be taught a lesson. But as thunder cracked above and lightning illuminated her fragile silhouette, he had no idea that the night he abandoned her would rewrite the course of his life forever. The night was still young when Ethan Carlisle, a man worth billions, stared out of his penthouse window overlooking Manhattan. The skyline glittered like a crown, but his expression was anything but proud. In his hand, he swirled an untouched glass of bourbon, amber liquid catching the faint glow of city lights. Ethan was not a man easily rattled. He had built empires, crushed competitors, and carved his name into the world of real estate and finance. But tonight, there was tension simmering in his home, one that money couldn't control. Across the room, sitting stiffly on the cream-colored sofa, was Naomi, his wife of 3 years. Her beauty had captivated him from the first day they met. Warm brown skin that glowed under any light, eyes deep and soulful, a smile that once melted the coldest parts of him. She was 6 months pregnant now, her curves softened by motherhood, her body carrying the weight of not only a child but the silent battles between them. The silence in the room was suffocating. Naomi shifted uncomfortably, placing her hand on her stomach as if protecting the life within. She hated the growing distance between her and Ethan. When they married, she had believed he saw her for more than just an accessory, more than the cynical whispers she'd overheard at charity galas about the billionaire's exotic wife. But as months passed, Ethan's heart seemed locked away behind his steel-blue eyes, the ones that now avoided her even as she spoke. "Ethan," Naomi finally said, her voice soft but trembling, "do you ever wonder what kind of world we're bringing this child into?" He didn't answer immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the skyline, as if the city could offer him clarity she could not. When he finally turned, his tone was clipped. "The kind of world where he'll never want for anything." Naomi's lips parted. That wasn't what she meant, not at all. "I don't mean money, Ethan. I mean love, security, values. The things that actually matter." A shadow crossed his face. "And you think I can't provide that?" "I think," Naomi whispered, swallowing back the lump in her throat, "that lately, you're so focused on control that you're forgetting what it means to care." The words stung him more than he'd admit. Ethan Carlisle did care, but in his world, caring often came dressed as discipline, as control. He believed structure was safety. Rules were protection. And Naomi was fiery, independent, unwilling to bend in ways he expected a wife to bend. "You always challenge me," he muttered, setting the bourbon aside with a hard clink of glass. "You push and push, as if you're testing how far I'll let you go." "Because I'm not a doll you can arrange on your shelf," she snapped, her voice breaking. Her hand clutched her stomach again, protective instinct flaring. "I am your wife, Ethan. Your partner. And right now, the mother of your child. Don't I deserve more than being punished when I speak my truth?" The word punished echoed through the room like a crack of lightning. Ethan's jaw tightened. His father had raised him on lessons of punishment and reward. It was the only language of love he understood. And tonight, Naomi's defiance lit a fuse he didn't know how to extinguish. "You want to speak of lessons," he said, his voice icy. "Then maybe tonight you'll learn one." Naomi's brows knit. "What do you mean?" But before she could get an answer, Ethan was already walking toward the door, his long strides filled with decision. He opened it, revealing the heavy downpour outside. The storm had been building for hours, but now it roared with relentless force. "Step out," he said coldly. Naomi's eyes widened. "What?" "You said you're not a doll. You said you want to be treated as more." "Fine. Step outside. Face the world you say you want our child to know, without my protection." Her heart lurched. The rain outside was violent, the wind slicing like knives. And yet, pride and heartbreak mingled in her chest. If she refused, he'd see her as weak. If she obeyed, she'd be humiliated. But above all, what gutted her most was that Ethan, the man who vowed to cherish her, could even suggest such cruelty. Slowly, Naomi rose. Her face glistened with unshed tears, her chin lifted in trembling defiance. Without another word, she stepped past him into the night. The storm swallowed her whole. Ethan shut the door behind her. Inside, the mansion was warm, glowing with golden light. Outside, Naomi stood drenched, the icy rain soaking her dress within seconds. She wrapped her arms around her belly, shivering, whispering to the life inside her, "I'm so sorry, baby." But Ethan's silhouette lingered behind the glass, watching. He told himself this was necessary, that she needed to understand boundaries, respect, obedience. He convinced himself that by teaching her this lesson, he was saving their marriage from chaos. Yet even as thunder boomed, a sliver of doubt sliced through him. And what he would never expect was how this single act would spiral into consequences that no wealth, no empire, no power could ever control. Do you think Ethan was trying to protect his marriage, or was he simply blinded by pride and control? Comment below. I'd love to hear what you think before we continue to the shocking next act. The rain poured mercilessly against the glass walls of the Carlisle mansion, streaking silver lines across the night. Naomi stood outside, one hand clutching her swollen belly, the other pounding on the locked door as her tears blended with the storm. Inside, Ethan Carlisle, her husband Billionaire, and the man she once believed was her safe haven, watched from behind the glass. He told himself this was necessary, that she needed to be taught a lesson. But he couldn't silence the flicker of unease clawing at his chest. Hours earlier, the storm had only been a whisper on the horizon. Inside the mansion, the air was already heavy with tension. Naomi sat curled on the sofa, trying to focus on the rhythmic hum of the rain tapping against the windows, but her mind kept circling back to Ethan, her husband, her protector, her betrayer. She had once loved everything about him, his certainty, his drive, his refusal to bow to anyone. He was tall and commanding, his presence filling every room. His steel-blue eyes could melt into warmth when he allowed them, but lately they had grown colder, harder, mirroring the walls he was building between them. Naomi pressed a hand to her belly. The baby shifted, a gentle reminder that she wasn't alone, even when Ethan felt so far away. She whispered softly, "Don't worry, sweetheart. Mommy's here. Mommy loves you." Ethan, meanwhile, stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows with a glass of bourbon in hand. The liquid remained untouched, his grip too tight for drinking. He wasn't a man who showed weakness easily. Vulnerability in his world was currency, and he had spent a lifetime protecting himself from poverty, betrayal, and failure. His father had drilled it into him since childhood: control or be controlled. Punish mistakes before they ruin you. Discipline is love, weakness is poison. Ethan thought he was protecting Naomi by being hard on her, by keeping her in line. But deep inside, a voice he refused to acknowledge whispered that maybe he was just repeating the same cold cycle his father had inflicted on his mother. Naomi's world had shrunk since her pregnancy began. She used to be a nurse, bright scrubs, bustling hospitals, patients who smiled when she entered the room. She had been proud of her work, proud to make a difference. But Ethan, always paranoid about her safety and his reputation, insisted she leave her job. "You don't need to work," he told her flatly one morning, sliding her resignation letter across the table as if it were already decided. "You're carrying my child. That's your priority now." At first, Naomi thought it was temporary. That once the baby was born, she'd return to the career she loved. But slowly, she realized Ethan didn't see her future that way. He saw her role as fixed, his wife, his child's mother, the woman who should remain inside the golden cage he built. That's why tonight's fight cut so deeply. It wasn't just about respect. It was about identity, independence, dignity. She longed for the Ethan she fell in love with, the man who noticed her laughter in a crowded cafe, who said her intelligence was what made her irresistible, who swore she was the only person who saw him for more than his billions. Where had that Ethan gone? "Ethan," Naomi had asked softly earlier that evening, "do you ever wonder what kind of world we're bringing this child into?" He answered without looking at her. "The kind of world where he'll never want for anything." She wanted to scream. He thought in dollars, not in heartbeats. In skyscrapers, not in lullabies. "I don't mean money," she whispered. "I mean love, security, values. The things that actually matter." His jaw tightened, pride bristling. "And you think I can't provide that?" "I think," she said, swallowing her pain, "that lately, you're so focused on control that you're forgetting what it means to care." That word, control, was his trigger. You always challenge me, he shot back, pacing now, voice rising. You test me. Do you know how many men would give their wives everything, and never get questioned? Do you know how many women would worship the ground I walk on just to live in this house? Naomi stood, tears gathering. I didn't marry you for this house. Or your money. I married you because I thought you loved me. I do love you, he snapped. But it came out defensive, brittle. That's why I need to remind you of your place. You think being my wife gives you the right to defy me at every turn? To shame me with your lectures? Her voice cracked. This isn't about shame, Ethan. This is about us. About our child. About whether we're going to raise him in love, or in fear. The words echoed through him like a ghost. Love or fear? His father had chosen fear. Ethan thought he was choosing love, but what if Naomi was right? Instead of answering, he hardened his tone. You need to understand consequences. Tonight, you will. And then he opened the door. The storm was merciless now, thunder cracking like a whip across the sky. The driveway glistened under the flood of rain, and the wind howled through the trees lining the estate. Naomi's heart pounded. She was 6 months pregnant, exhausted, vulnerable. Yet pride, and a desperate need to prove she was not his pawn, kept her rooted. Step outside, Ethan commanded. Her eyes filled with disbelief. You can't be serious. Do it. Ethan, I'm carrying your child. Then show him strength, he said coldly. Show him you don't crumble just because life isn't comfortable. The cruelty in his words shattered something inside her. With a trembling chin, she straightened her shoulders. Fine. And she walked out into the storm. The first drop hit her like ice. Then another. Within seconds, her dress clung to her skin, heavy and suffocating. The wind whipped her braids against her face. She hugged her belly tightly, whispering apologies to the life within. Inside, Ethan shut the door. He lingered by the window, arms folded, telling himself he was in control. That she'd only be out there for minutes before begging to come back inside. That this was necessary. But as the storm raged on, doubt gnawed at him. Because outside, through the sheets of rain, Naomi was no longer just his wife. She was a woman abandoned by the man who vowed to protect her, standing alone in the storm, pregnant, fragile, yet fiercely defiant. And deep down, Ethan Carlyle had no idea that this single night would be the unraveling of everything he thought he controlled. If you were Naomi, would you have stepped out into the storm to prove your strength, or refused to obey Ethan at all costs? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. The storm swallowed Naomi whole. The driveway stretched long and merciless, every drop of rain a bullet against her skin. She staggered, her breath shallow, her body weighed down by exhaustion and fear. The mansion's golden lights glowed behind her like a cruel beacon, close enough to see, far enough to feel unreachable. She pressed her palm to her belly. The baby kicked softly, a fragile reminder that she wasn't alone. I'm sorry, sweetheart, she whispered through trembling lips. Mommy's strong. Mommy's here. Her tears blended with the rain, and still she forced one foot in front of the other. Inside, Ethan watched from behind the glass. His chest rose and fell with a battle he didn't want to name. He told himself she'd come back, knocking, pleading to be let in. That this would humble her, teach her obedience. But as seconds stretched into minutes, his certainty began to erode. Naomi didn't turn back. The wind cut through her thin dress, wrapping icy fingers around her bones. She hugged herself tighter, but nothing could shield her from the storm's rage. Every gust pushed her sideways, every puddle threatened to swallow her shoes. Her mind spun. Why is he doing this? Why can't he see me? The world blurred, partly from rain, partly from dizziness. She hadn't eaten much at dinner, too anxious to force food down. Her body cried for warmth, for safety. And yet, there was a fire in her chest. A refusal to break. If Ethan wanted to see her strength, she would show him. But strength had its limits. Her breath grew shallow, her vision hazy. A cramp tightened across her stomach, sharp and unexpected. Panic surged. She froze, clutching her belly. Please, not now, she whispered. Inside, Ethan poured another drink, though his hand trembled. He tried to drown his guilt in logic. She'll be fine. She's not fragile. I'm not hurting her. I'm teaching her. But the voice of reason clashed with another voice, his mother's. He saw her face in his memory, pale, bruised, eyes hollow from years of enduring his father's lessons. Ethan had been just a boy then, watching silently as she suffered, believing punishment was love because that was all he knew. His grip tightened on the glass. Am I becoming him? A flash of lightning lit the driveway, and in that moment, Ethan saw Naomi stagger. His heart lurched. No, he muttered. She's stronger than this. But unease clawed deeper. Naomi's knees buckled. She hit the ground with a soft cry, mud splashing around her. Her hands dug into the earth as another cramp seized her body. Panic exploded in her chest. She was only 6 months along, too early, far too early. She tried to push herself up, but her body trembled violently. The rain blurred everything, drowning out her sobs. Help, someone help. Her voice was swallowed by the storm. Inside, Ethan saw her collapse. His glass slipped from his hand, shattering against the floor. No. His chest constricted. His controlled mask cracked, panic surging like wildfire. He bolted to the door, flinging it open. The storm slammed into him, drenching his clothes instantly. He raced down the driveway, his polished shoes slipping against the mud. Naomi! He shouted, his voice raw. She lay crumpled, her face pale, her body trembling. When he reached her, his heart stopped. God, no. Naomi! He dropped to his knees, lifting her into his arms. Her skin was icy, her lips trembling. She clung weakly to his shirt, whispering, "The baby. Ethan, the baby." Panic ripped through him like nothing he'd ever felt. The next hours blurred into chaos. Ethan carried Naomi to the car, his mind spinning, his heart pounding louder than the storm. Tires screeched across wet roads as he sped toward the hospital, his hands white-knuckled on the wheel. Naomi drifted in and out of consciousness, whispering prayers through tears. At the ER entrance, nurses rushed to her aid, wheeling her inside as Ethan barked orders. "She's 6 months pregnant," she collapsed. "Save her, save them both." Doctors swarmed. The smell of antiseptic, the glare of fluorescent lights, the cold sterility of the hospital, everything blurred into one frantic whirlwind. Ethan stood outside the operating room, drenched and shaking, his heart clawing against his ribs. He had never felt powerless before. Not in boardrooms, not in battles over billions. But now he was just a man, terrified of losing the woman he loved and the child he had barely allowed himself to dream about. Time stretched cruelly. Minutes felt like years. Ethan paced the corridor, hands buried in his soaked hair. Finally, a doctor emerged. Ethan rushed forward, desperation etched into his face. "How is she?" The doctor's expression was serious but calm. "She and the baby are stable, for now. The stress and exposure triggered early contractions. We managed to stop them, but it was close. She'll need monitoring and strict rest. No stress, no overexertion." Relief and guilt slammed into Ethan at once. He exhaled shakily, whispering, "Thank God." But the doctor wasn't finished. His gaze hardened slightly. "Mr. Carlyle, may I be frank?" Ethan nodded numbly. Whatever put her under that kind of stress, it cannot happen again. Another episode like this, and you could lose them both. The words cut deeper than any business failure ever could. Ethan pressed his hand to his face, trembling. What have I done? Hours later, Ethan sat by Naomi's hospital bed. Machines hummed softly, her steady breathing a fragile melody in the sterile room. Her skin was pale but warm now, her belly gently rising with each breath. He reached for her hand, but she stirred, pulling it weakly away. Her eyes fluttered open, glassy with exhaustion, and hurt. "Naomi," his voice cracked. "I'm so sorry." She looked at him, her lips parting. But no words came. Only silence. And in that silence, Ethan felt the weight of his choices crush him. This wasn't a lesson. This was destruction. And he knew with terrifying clarity that the night he left his pregnant wife in the rain was the night he began to lose her forever. Do you think Ethan's guilt is enough to change him, or has the damage already gone too deep? Comment your thoughts. I'm curious if you'd forgive him at this point. Morning light filtered weakly through the blinds, casting pale stripes across the hospital floor. Naomi lay propped against the pillows, her body still weak, her spirit guarded. Machines beeped softly, steady and indifferent, as though mocking the chaos in her heart. Ethan sat at her bedside, shoulders hunched, eyes bloodshot from a sleepless night. He had never looked so human, so undone. But Naomi couldn't bring herself to meet his gaze. When a nurse entered to check her vitals, Naomi smiled faintly, thanking her in a soft voice. The moment the nurse left, silence filled the room again. Ethan cleared his throat, his voice hesitant. "Naomi." She didn't answer. Her eyes drifted toward the window where the sun battled against gray clouds. "I was wrong," Ethan said finally, his voice cracking. "I thought I was protecting us, protecting our marriage, by teaching you discipline. But I see now, I was just cruel. I almost lost you. I almost lost." His eyes dropped to her belly. "Everything." Still, Naomi remained silent. The silence was worse than anger. Anger, at least, meant she still felt something for him. But this silence was an ocean, and Ethan was drowning in it. Inside her, Naomi's heart screamed with words she couldn't voice. She wanted to tell him how abandoned she had felt, how terrifying it had been to collapse in the rain. She wanted to tell him how betrayal cut deeper than the storm ever could. But the exhaustion was heavier than her voice. And trust, it wasn't something words could patch overnight. She turned finally, her gaze sharp but weary. "Do you even hear yourself, Ethan? You talk about protection, discipline, lessons. But do you even see me? Do you see the woman you married, or just someone you think you need to control?" His face fell. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Naomi closed her eyes, as if dismissing him. The ache in her chest was too heavy to keep looking at him. Later that day, Ethan stepped out into the hospital corridor. The sterile scent of antiseptic stung his nose as he leaned against the wall, dragging a hand through his hair. His assistant, Robert, arrived in a rush, carrying files and updates on meetings Ethan had skipped. "Sir, the board is panicking. Your absence is making headlines. Investors want answers." "I don't care," Ethan snapped. "My wife and child almost died last night. Business can wait." Robert stared. He had worked for Ethan for 10 years and never heard those words from his lips. But word was already spreading. Gossip sites had caught whispers of Naomi's hospitalization. One headline read, "Billionaire Carlyle's pregnant wife collapses amid rumors of marital strain." For a man obsessed with control, this public scrutiny was unbearable. But for the first time in his life, Ethan didn't care about his empire more than his family. The problem was, Naomi didn't believe him. That afternoon, Naomi's mother, Angela, arrived at the hospital. Her presence filled the room with warmth Naomi had been craving. Angela was strong, dignified, her voice steady even in storms. She wrapped her daughter in a gentle embrace, whispering, "Baby girl, I'm here." Then she turned to Ethan. Her eyes narrowed, her voice sharp as a blade. "What did you do to her?" Ethan stiffened. "Mrs. Moore." "No." She cut him off, her finger pointed. "Don't you dare give me excuses. My daughter nearly lost her life, and I want to know why." Naomi flinched, whispering, "Mama, please." But Angela pressed on. "Naomi left everything for you, her job, her world, and you repay her with stress and pain? Do you even love her, or is she just another trophy for your shelf?" Ethan's throat tightened. For the first time in years, he had no defense. "I do love her," he whispered hoarsely. "More than anything. I don't know how to show it the right way." Angela studied him, her expression softening slightly, but her words remained firm. "Then you better learn. Because love that hurts isn't love at all. And if you can't change, you don't deserve her." Naomi turned away, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. Over the next week, Naomi remained in the hospital under observation. Ethan rarely left her side, though she spoke little to him. He brought her favorite flowers, read aloud from the book she had been reading before the fight, even tried cooking, though the hospital staff kindly suggested he leave the meals to the professionals. He was trying, desperately. But Naomi's heart wasn't ready to forgive. At night, when he thought she was asleep, Ethan sat by her bed whispering apologies into the dark. "I'm sorry, Naomi. I don't know how to undo the past, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying. Sometimes, Naomi heard him. And sometimes, her hand ached to reach for his. But the memory of the rain, the fear of losing her baby, held her still. News outlets feasted on the story. Paparazzi camped outside the hospital, snapping photos of Ethan arriving with flowers, of Naomi looking tired and pale. Speculation ran wild. Marriage in crisis? Billionaire Carlisle's wife seen refusing husband's hand. Investors grew restless. Board members whispered that Ethan's judgment was slipping. Rivals circled like vultures, eager to exploit his distraction. Ethan was used to fighting off enemies in business. But this battle, earning back Naomi's trust, felt impossible. One evening, after the nurses left, Naomi spoke quietly, her voice fragile. Do you know what it felt like? Out there in the rain. Ethan froze. His heart hammered as he turned to her. Tell me. It felt like being nothing, she whispered. Like the woman you promised to love was just, disposable. Like I didn't matter, not to you, not to anyone. I kept telling myself I was strong, but inside I was terrified. Terrified I was going to lose our baby. Alone. Her voice broke, tears streaming freely now. Ethan's chest caved. He reached for her hand, and this time, she didn't pull away. Naomi. I swear to you, you are not disposable. You are my heart. My world. I was wrong, and I will never do anything to make you feel that way again. She studied him, searching for sincerity. Her lips trembled. I don't know if I can trust you anymore. The words sliced him open. But he nodded, voice hoarse. Then let me earn it back. However long it takes. Just as a fragile thread of hope began to form between them, another blow arrived. Late one night, Ethan received a call. His lawyer's voice was tense. Ethan, your rivals are exploiting the scandal. There's talk of an emergency vote to strip you of control at the next board meeting. They're saying your personal life proves you're unfit. Ethan's jaw clenched. He had built his empire brick by brick, sacrifice after sacrifice. And now, because of his mistakes at home, everything was crumbling. But as he turned to look at Naomi, resting fitfully with her hand on her belly, he realized something startling. For the first time in his life, he didn't care about the empire as much as he cared about her. Still, the stakes were higher than ever. If Ethan couldn't hold his business together, Naomi would face not only emotional strain but also financial ruin, and the vultures waiting to devour what he built wouldn't hesitate to smear her name too. The storm between them was far from over. And as Naomi drifted to sleep, Ethan sat in the chair beside her, whispering to himself, I have to fight for her. For us. Or I'll lose everything that truly matters. If you were Naomi, would you start to forgive Ethan after seeing his efforts, or would the wound of betrayal be too deep? Comment below. I want to know if you believe people like Ethan can truly change. The Carlisle Tower boardroom buzzed with murmurs as men and women in sleek suits gathered around the long mahogany table. The air was thick with anticipation and bloodlust. Ethan entered, his expression sharp but heavy, as though he carried the weight of two worlds on his shoulders. He wore his usual tailored suit, but his eyes betrayed sleepless nights, his mind still tethered to Naomi's hospital bed. At the head of the table, his rival, Victor Hale, leaned back with smug ease. Gentlemen, ladies, thank you for assembling on such short notice. We all know why we're here. Carlisle's personal scandal has shaken investor confidence. His domestic failures prove he lacks the stability to lead this empire. I propose a vote to remove him as CEO. Whispers rippled through the room. Ethan stood tall, his voice calm but steely. This empire was built with my blood, sweat, and sleepless nights. You think a scandal defines me? You think one mistake erases decades of triumphs? You're wrong. Victor smirked. Mistake? The press reports your pregnant wife nearly lost your child because of you. Investors don't care about your excuses, they care about risk. And right now, Ethan Carlisle is a risk. The words cut deep. But Ethan inhaled, steadying himself. For years, power had been his compass. But as he stood there, Naomi's pale face in the rain flashed before his eyes, her whisper in the hospital bed, "Do you even see me?" And suddenly, Ethan knew. He didn't care about winning this battle. Not if it cost him her. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Naomi sat upright, her mother adjusting pillows behind her. The TV played muted coverage of the Carlisle board meeting. The headline scrolled across the screen: Billionaire Carlisle faces vote of no confidence amid personal scandal. Naomi's heart twisted. For all his flaws, Ethan had built his empire from nothing. To see it torn apart, partly because of what happened between them, left her conflicted. Angela, sensing her daughter's turmoil, placed a hand on hers. "Baby girl, don't let guilt bind you. His choices are his own. You just focus on that baby." Naomi nodded weakly. But inside, she wondered, could Ethan truly change? Could she allow herself to believe him again? Back in the boardroom, Victor's voice rang out, "All in favor of removing Ethan Carlisle as CEO, raise your hands." Hands shot up 1, 2, 3, half the room, then more. Ethan remained still, watching the people he had trusted for years betray him with ease. Then came his turn to speak. "You want to know the truth," he said, his voice calm but resonant. "You're right. I failed. I failed my wife, the woman who trusted me to protect her, and I almost lost my child. And if that makes me unfit to lead in your eyes, so be it." The room froze. This wasn't the Ethan Carlisle they knew, the man who fought tooth and nail for every inch of power. This was a man stripped bare. "But let me tell you this," Ethan continued, his voice growing stronger. "An empire without love is hollow. A man without his family is nothing. I won't sacrifice my wife and child for the sake of numbers on a chart or men in suits who care more about gossip than vision. If that costs me this chair, I'll walk away proudly. Because for the first time in my life, I know what truly matters." A stunned silence followed. Victor sneered. "So you admit defeat?" Ethan met his gaze, unflinching. "No. I admit I finally understand victory." The boardroom doors creaked open. Heads turned. And there, to Ethan's shock, stood Naomi, frail but radiant, her mother steadying her arm. She had insisted on leaving the hospital, against doctor's orders, to see this moment with her own eyes. Gasps filled the room. Cameras flashed. Naomi's voice, though soft, cut through the tension. "Ethan Carlisle." He turned, breath stolen. She stepped closer, her gaze steady. "You nearly destroyed me. You nearly destroyed us. But today, I see something I never thought I'd see, you choosing love over power. And maybe that's the man I married." The board members whispered furiously, the media lapped up every word, but in that moment, only Ethan and Naomi existed. Ethan's eyes glistened. "Naomi, I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'll spend the rest of my life proving I've changed. Starting now. With you." For a long moment, she studied him, searching for the man she once loved. Slowly, her lips trembled into the faintest of smiles. "Then prove it. Not to them. To me." Victor slammed his fist on the table. "This is a circus. Are we letting emotions dictate business now?" One of the elder board members, who had remained silent until now, spoke firmly. "Carlisle built this empire from the ground up. If he's man enough to admit his faults and still stand tall, that's leadership. Victor, sit down." Murmurs of agreement spread. Several hands that had been raised for Ethan's removal slowly lowered. The tide shifted. The motion to remove him failed. Victor's face darkened, his victory slipping away. But Ethan hardly noticed. His gaze remained fixed on Naomi, the only win he truly cared about. As the boardroom emptied, Naomi swayed slightly, exhaustion pulling at her. Ethan rushed to her side, steadying her with gentle hands. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. "The doctors." "I had to see for myself," she interrupted, her voice fragile but determined. "I had to know if you'd finally choose me." His eyes softened, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "I choose you, Naomi. Always. From now on, always." For the first time since the storm, Naomi felt a flicker of hope. That night, as they drove home together, Naomi rested her head against the window, still uncertain, still fragile, but for the first time in weeks, not entirely closed off. Ethan glanced at her, his heart heavy but hopeful. He knew the battle wasn't over. Winning her trust back would take more than words or grand gestures. But he was ready to fight, not with control, not with power, but with love. And for Ethan Carlisle, That was the greatest lesson of all. Do you think Naomi should give Ethan another chance now that he's finally standing for love over power, or is it too little, too late? Comment your answer. I'd love to know where your heart leans. The Carlisle mansion stood silent in the early evening, its vast halls echoing with absence. For weeks, it had been a palace of coldness and control, but tonight it felt different, humbled, softened. Naomi stepped cautiously through the front door, Ethan steadying her arm. She paused, scanning the place that had once felt like a gilded cage. Could it become a home again? Ethan seemed to read her thoughts. "This house has been mine for years," he said softly, "but it's never been ours. I want to change that. I want you to feel safe here, cherished here." Naomi's lips pressed together. She wanted to believe him. But trust was not a switch, it was a seed fragile, needing care. In the weeks that followed, Ethan became a man unrecognizable from the billionaire she once knew. He attended therapy sessions, not just with Naomi, but on his own. He confronted the shadow of his father, admitting aloud for the first time that cruelty had been mistaken for strength. He surprised Naomi with small gestures, her favorite tea by her bedside, handwritten notes slipped under her door, evenings spent listening rather than speaking. Naomi watched, guarded but curious. Each act chipped away at her walls, though fear still whispered in her heart, what if he reverts? What if the storm returns? One evening, as they sat by the fireplace, Ethan reached for her hand. "Naomi, I know you're still afraid. I know I can't erase the rain, or what I did. But I swear, I will never put you in that place again. You and our child are my everything. And if I ever falter, hold me accountable. Don't let me become him." Her eyes softened. For the first time, she saw not the billionaire, but the broken boy inside, begging to be better. Naomi wasn't passive in this healing. She found her voice again, through therapy, through journaling, through conversations with her mother. She began to reclaim the woman she had been before Ethan's shadow grew too long. She spoke of her dreams, returning to nursing, raising their child with compassion, building a life rooted not in wealth but in love. Ethan listened. Truly listened. And slowly, trust began to take root. Months later, under a clear spring sky, Naomi went into labor. Ethan held her hand through every contraction, whispering encouragements, tears in his eyes as he watched her strength eclipse any power he had ever known. "You're incredible," he breathed, kissing her damp forehead. "I've never seen anything braver." Hours later, their cries were joined by a new one, their son's. The doctor placed the tiny bundle in Naomi's arms, and she gazed down, overwhelmed with awe. Ethan leaned close, his hand trembling as he touched the baby's tiny fingers. "Naomi," he whispered, voice breaking. "Thank you for giving me him. For giving me another chance." Naomi looked up, tears streaming, and for the first time since the storm, she smiled fully. This is what matters." Weeks later, the three of them sat together in the garden behind the mansion. The stormy season had passed, the air was warm, the sky painted with streaks of pink and gold. Naomi rocked their son gently, while Ethan sat close, his arm draped protectively but gently across her shoulders. She turned to him. "Do you ever think about that night? The rain?" His expression darkened briefly. "Every day. And I swear to you, I'll never let you feel that kind of pain again." Naomi studied him, then leaned her head against his shoulder. "We can't erase it, Ethan. But maybe, we can grow something stronger from it." He kissed her temple, whispering, "Stronger. Together." The baby stirred softly, his tiny hand gripping Ethan's finger. For Ethan Carlisle, the man who once worshipped only power, this was the truest victory, not the empire, not the fortune, but the fragile, beautiful family in his arms. The storm had nearly destroyed them. But sometimes, storms strip everything bare, leaving space for something new to grow. Naomi and Ethan had been broken. But now together, they had the chance to heal. And for the first time in a long time, Naomi believed in hope. If you were Naomi, would you believe Ethan had truly changed after the birth of their child, or would you still guard your heart? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe for more amazing and interesting stories.